Hi everyone, so lately I've played some Crushing Hand Spiritborn and had an absolute blast with this build. So I want to show it off and also talk about some of the tweaks I've made since my season launch video. I talked about this before already and I have a macro guide for leveling and endgame for this build, so you can go check those out. I will show them briefly. But I gotta say, this is an absolute super fun blast to play build and it's so fast. I already expected this to be one of the best speedfinding builds in the game, but I can actually clear some pits in like sub 60 seconds on this build, even faster than the evade build in some cases. And the reason for that is the screen wide AoE almost, and you can jump from pack to pack with the Hunter, the Ravager, and I even have the teleport rune in there, so you can just fly through those maps. And you see here, even pit 100 I destroy in like 2.5 minutes. So it can be optimized even further. This character is far from perfect, but it has so much raw power, it turns out, that it just kind of decimates everything in the game. You can do the Torment with bosses in seconds, in Torment 4, in Foreman parties. You destroy tier 100s, you can go way further than that. It can probably reach all the way to like 120 or 130 or so if you go all in, and it's just super fun and fast. Similar to many other core skill builds, this relies on a Rod of Kepelek and the Midnight Sun combo in order to spend and refill your resources really quickly and get this guaranteed crit effect from the staff. So this is a very powerful combo, and on top of this we get a lot of other perks from converting our core skill into a basic skill. So for example, we can use Prodigy's Tempo Key passive, which is what you have here in this build, where we can reset all of our cooldowns very fast. And in fact, I went for a Harlequin Crest in the setup. I was playing this first with a Harmony of Ebawaka, which is the Spiritborn helm that a lot of builds use for the 90% extra damage buff. But it turns out that Harlequin actually just is better than that, because even though it doesn't give so much raw power, there are a lot of extra small perks that add up and give you roughly the same damage with more utility and more defense. And this made the setup super smooth because I have extra cooldown reduction, and with the Prodigy's Tempo Key passive, we reset all of our cooldowns faster depending on how many skill ranks they have, which is where Harlequin Crest comes in and makes all of our cooldowns basically permanent uptime. So like this, you can face roll all of your buttons all the time, you get massive damage buffs, you get big defense, you can jump around with the Hunter, and it just feels super good. So we have this here. This is the Crushing Hand Gorilla Spiritborn endgame guide that you can find on Maxroll. I actually moved up this build into S tier. We had it in A previously, and some other like interesting scaling mechanisms here are the resolve stacks as well. So this is kind of unique to Crushing Hand. Right now, okay, there's a bug where a lot of builds go for resolve stacking, so that's a thing, but this build in particular actually just does it by default. So you try to get a lot of resolve stacks, and this gives you, first of all, more hits that you can take before you lose the damage reduction buff from resolve. But more importantly, we have multiple ways of scaling resolve offensively and defensively in this build. One of them is the Crushing Hand itself. So this has one of the upgrades where you get 3% extra damage up to 141% per stack of resolve that you have. So you just kind of get an extra benefit for stacking resolve on this build by default. Then we also have, for example, the Perseverance passive. So this is one of the defensive passives here. You get a lot of damage reduction. You're going to be super tanky with all those resolve stacks. And we have the Colossal Glyph here that allows us to scale even more damage from resolves. It's 2% per resolve stack, so you get another 80% damage multi or so. You can reach like 40 plus resolve stacks when you have this masterworked, and masterworking is actually really valuable here. So you see like a nice increase in your power curve as you improve your gear and as you improve your masterworks. Lastly, we also have the interdiction aspect, which we have on the pants, for example. This gives you more block chance per resolve stack. And currently block chance is actually not capped with redirected force. So this is probably a bug, but for now this gives us a lot of extra power as well from the redirected force aspect. So you have like something like 500% block chance or so, and then you get an insane amount of extra crit damage here from redirected force. So this is also part of the reason why this is so powerful right now. If you have been playing Crushing Hand before, you might have noticed some of those tweaks I made. For example, I also have the Jens Blessing here. Previously I had Rakonov boots. They're kind of interchangeable. The main reason to use those boots is the all res, which kind of carries your entire all res that you need for the entire build, even in Torment 4. So this is very nice, but they also come with some resource generation here. So that's why I put them into the build. The resource generation helps you to get this Rod of Kepeleke and Midnight Sun combo online. The way this works is that you have to try to hit a breakpoint where your Midnight Sun ring fully restores your resources in one hit. And that gives you get permanent Rod of Kapeleke every single attack. You get a guaranteed crit and it's supercharged and does a lot of damage, and it's also much larger. Crushing Hand is very high, like a big AoE when you have the Rod of Kapeleke proc, because it casts at maximum size. And the way to achieve this is to stack some resource generation and then some points here on the paragons. So for example, we have the sapping board that has some extra resource generation nodes here. This is the opportunist node here and some magic nodes around it. And then we have the Ravager that gives you 30%. We have this Yen's Blessing that gives you some resource generation. You can also put 1 or even 2 Templars on your jewelry. There's resource generation. And together with all the other benefits that you get to the point where a Midnight Sun Ring, when you crit, will instead of 50% actually give you 100% resources. Now this really depends on the role that you have on this ring as well. If you have a bad Midnight Sun and it's like 35% or 40% or so, then you will likely not have this combo fully online. So this is then our one priority: get a good Midnight Sun ring that has a high affix, and like this, with a bit of extra resource generation, you get to the point where you will always restore your entire resources, and then you get the full combo. Most of the rest of the setup is just scaling more damage synergies. Previously I had a different Spirit Hall combo. I had Centipede and Jaguar with the Harmony Helm, and now I actually changed it to Jaguar Gorilla, because with the Shaco, especially in the final setup, this felt much better, because this Jaguar Hull actually contributes quite a lot of damage, it turns out, and this made this whole setup kind of worth it. With the Jaguar primary hull, we can also get a bunch of extra nice passes here on the tree. So we have Potent and Furnace, for example. It does some damage on its own based on the hits that you're doing. And the Gorilla Hull gives us even more resolve stacks, gives us the permanent Unstoppable, which you should kind of have from Armored Hide anyway. You kind of want to press this all the time, but it's like a nice backup. And the resolve stacks helps us more than anything else down here anyway. And if those resolve stacks are not enough, you have even more defenses. So you can, for example, do counter attack. And again, with Prodigy's Temple, you reset this really fast, so you can kind of just counter attack whenever you want. And sometimes you want to leave it down so they can actually block, because the dodge comes before blocking. So if you have counter attack active, you will not block, and this is important for the redirected force aspect. So when you're not really in danger, then I would rather not use counter attack, so you can get an extra damage buff from redirected force. But if you are like fighting, for example, pit bosses, I like pressing the counter attack sometimes to just avoid the damage from like a shadow boss mechanic, for example. It is really nice. You have the Scourge in here. This gives you extra healing in case you need it, but most of the time I never lose my barriers even. This build has insane amounts of barrier generation, but it's in the backup here, and we also get the 50% extra damage for crowd controlled enemies. There's actually a lot of crowd control in this build. So first of all, you have like knockdown chance from the Paragon board here. The Revealing board gives you a knockdown. We can also put like stun, immobilize, freeze here on our gear as well. And you have like just generally like very fast stagger, very high crowd control. So this feels really nice when something actually lives more than one hit. And on top of this, we benefit here with the Scourge with extra damage. But most of the time, you don't really need the healing because of the barriers. As I mentioned, we have the Earthen Bulwark here. Then you have the POC, Q, Rune combo, where when we spend our resources, we get the Bulwark. Since we always spend 100% of our resources with the Rod of Kapeleke Midnight Sun combo, and we attack like 3-4 times per second, we can basically proc a Bulwark once every second or so. So you have basically permanent uptime of this, and this gives you like a lot of barrier already. And then you also get some extra barrier generation. So for example, here on the Paragons, we have some nodes on the Viscous Shield board, and we have that here. And together with the Viscous Shield node, you get a lot of extra damage. Right now, Viscous Shield is actually bugged and gives you a lot more damage than it should. So this will eventually get fixed, but this is something that all Spiritborn builds are affected by. So you just kind of like get it by accident, and this means that you need to have your barriers up as much as possible. So this is how we do it. Crushing Hands gives a barrier, and the Earthen Bulwark. And that's pretty much the main combo of the setup. There is more progression steps along the way. So for example, here, before you have the Shaco, you go Harmony, and then we switch our Spirit Hall combo here. We go Jaguar Centipede. This is not really that important, but we get a third tag for our Harmony. So that's the main reason to do this. Otherwise, we just kind of keep the Jaguar Gorilla combo in most of these setups here, which is just really nice. And for example, also early on, if you're just starting out with a fresh Spiritborn, then you also have like a bit of a tweak here on your skill tree. So for example, this goes Vital Strikes instead of Prodigy's Tempo in the early game. We don't really have our cooldowns all the time. and we go for a lot of like vulnerable application in order to trigger vital strikes for resources. But later on, once you have your resources figured out with a Midnight Sun Ring, then you don't need this anymore, and Policy's Tempo gives you all of the cooldowns that you ever want, and then this feels very smooth and fast. If you want to find more info, I recommend go check out my Maxwell guide here. So this is the Endgame guide. There's also a leveling guide. You can find this in the build guides here on Spiritborn. You can just select it. Here it is. And here's also the Crushing Hand guide. Hope you enjoyed this little update for my Crushing Hand to Spiritborn. I had a ton of fun with this so far. I'm definitely going to play it more, but man, it is a blast with this build. So I can just recommend you go try it out. If you want to try something else that's not just quill volley and evade, this is certainly next in line here. So I'm going to leave you with this. Hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys next time.